Good evening, everybody. Uh, I take great pleasure and honor to introduce Mr. Ganesh Devy. Mr. Ganesh Devy, it is a challenge to introduce somebody like Mr. Devy, for here is a man whose scholarship is not confined to the narrow boundaries of a single discipline. Teacher, cultural activist, linguist, and a man committed so deeply to the cause of institution building. Mr. Devy is a man whose wide interests and deep knowledge in multiple disciplines make it almost impossible to find the words to do him justice. Educated at Shivaji University, Kolhapur and University of Leeds, UK, Mr. Devy has held fellowships at Leeds University and Yale University and has been THB Simmons Fellow from 1991 to 92 and Jawaharlal Nehru Fellow from 94 to 96. He was a professor of English at the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda from 1980 to 1996. Mr. Devy's education has been as much at the institutions that he has learned and taught at as it has been among the people he has worked for. In 1996, he gave up his academic career in order to initiate work with the denotified and nomadic tribes, that is DNT and Adivasis. During this work, he created the Bhasha Research and Publication Center at Baroda, the Adivasi Academy at Tejgarh, the DNT Rights Action Group, and several other initiatives. Later, he initiated the largest ever survey of languages in history, carried out with the help of nearly 3,000 volunteers and published in 50 multilingual volumes. This is the largest such exercise conducted in the independent India and a remarkable achievement. All of humanity is richer for his efforts. Mr. Devy has received several Lifetime Achievement Awards. He was awarded the Padma Shri on 26 January 2014 in recognition of his work with the denotified and nomadic tribes and endangered languages. He was awarded the Sahitya Academy Award in '93 for After Amnesia and SARC Writers Foundation Award in 2001 for his work with the denotified tribals. He was given, he was given the reputed Prince Claus Award in 2003 for his work for the conservation of tribal arts and craft. His Marathi book, Vanaprast, received 8 awards, including the Durga Bhagwat Memorial Award and the Maharashtra Foundation Award. Along with Lakshman Gaikwad and Mahashweta Devi, he was one of the founders of the Denotified and Nomadic Tribes Rights Action Group, better known as DNT-RAG. He won the 2011 Lingua Pax Prize for his work for the preservation of linguistic diversity. Sir, it's an honor to have you to deliver the final keynote address that marks the end of a great festival of ideas and stories. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much indeed for your kind words and a very generous introduction. I feel very pleased to be with all of you who are interested in both the structure and the nature of myths and also what myths can do for us and to us, and amuse by what myths are, what they can be, and how they function in our collective consciousness. About half a century ago, Northrop Frye, speaking about the role of myth in the Western world, put forward a very interesting observation. He said that in ancient times, myths worked in a very high mimetic mode, almost as if they had a divine shell, an aura of divinity. And then a phase came when myth entered a low mimetic mode. And finally, in his times, or I will say in our time, myth came down to an ironic mode. What he was trying to say is that in ancient times, remote, distant ancient times, myths actually sounded like reality. That the distinction between reality and myth did not exist or did not exist to the same extent that it started existing later. Characters from real life could enter characters from myths, could enter myths, and characters from myths could enter real life in those memories of those times. And later, people started writing or about myths or using myths for dramatic production or for poetic production. So myth became material for use by creative minds, and that was a low mimetic mode. But in his times, or as I said, in our time, the relationship was of ironic nature. For instance, James Joyce or T.S. Eliot use myths fully knowing that they were using them, especially to establish a contradistinction between what exists in myth and what exists in the writer's time. The alienation from myth in the West is a phenomenon widely spread, widely associated with the rise of modernity, widely accepted as an aftermath of an industrialization of the society and economy. But that phenomenon has not been experienced by people in other countries, in Africa or in Asia or among the indigenous communities in Australia and Canada. And it is necessary to ask why? Why at all? Myth disappeared from European life. When I say it disappeared, I'm not reporting the loss of a person to a police station, but by and large, the citizens in modern Western countries do not relate to myths the same way as citizens in Ghana or Nigeria or Kenya or India or Indonesia relate to myths in their own traditions. In that sense, myth disappeared in the West. Alienation from myth was almost absolute there. Why is there such a difference in human attitude to myth in the West and in the non-West? That's a question that has always interested me. It has intrigued me. So here I offer some observations. The beginning of alienation from myth in the West coincides with the rise of a systematic history writing as a discipline after Hegel. That is, when people know about their past in a systematized way, when people are able to look at the past to the extent it is possible to look at the past at all, from a known or a defined or a predictable perspective, the past gets tamed easily, easy to handle, easy to pursue, easy to classify, categorize, and suddenly the mythic elements that were active in the past, related to the past, start dropping off. In our country, if we go by that observation, and if we look at our past in our country, we find that in a country like India, there is no single idea about the origin of the Indian people. And thank goodness there is no such idea of a single origin. We know something about our past till Chandragupta Maurya from written documents. A few centuries before that, up to Buddha, through philosophical histories of philosophy, and if couple of about 3 or 4 centuries prior to Buddha, up to the Vedas through oral traditions. But what was there before the Vedas? If such a question is asked to an Indian, uh, probably one would just throw one's hands up and say, well, we don't know. Of course, we know through archaeology that a civilization now named as Indus civilization, it's a name given by us in the 19th century, 20th century to that civilization. That is cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa and several other hundreds of other sites extending from Western India, Kutch and Gujarat to far west, which parts that are not in India today. A civilization existed there. It probably started taking shape in the third millennium before Christ. That's roughly 5,000 years before our time. It came to its true form around the 24th century before Christ and remained there in place till the 19th century before Christ. That's roughly 4,000 years before our time. But we know very little about them. Who were these people? There is a theory that some of them went from the south and settled there. There is another theory that they had moved east from Egypt and Iran and had settled there. But there have also been other, and between the end of this period and the rise of the Vedas, there's a huge window of time which is in our memory blank. Now, sometime around the 8th century before Christ, the initial form of the Mahabharata started emerging. In India, our most precious repository of the myth is Mahabharata, not the Vedas. It is the Mahabharata and to some extent the Ramayana. 8 centuries before Christ, the seed form, the Jaya Itihasa, had started emerging as a small short poems, long heroic poem, but relatively short. Some 6 or 7 centuries after that, a second writing of the Mahabharata happened by someone who put together, edited everything, a man called Vyasa. And then we had 1 lakh verses of the Mahabharata and hundreds, probably thousands of characters who are mythical characters. From where did Vyasa draw all these mythical characters? The answer is all the histories prior to the Vedas that we do not know about, but some of the people of those times had some faint idea about, collapsed together in the mythical stories that are woven into the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata actually determined the attitude of looking at the past. The Mahabharata is not just about a war, it is also about how to internalize the past. And the Mahabharata method of internalizing the past is to accept history as if it is myth, not accept myth as if it is history. Vyasa turned many known historical accounts into mythical stories and many half-known historical accounts into mythical possibilities. And he actually sprinkled them all along various non-essential books of the Mahabharata. The Adi Parva is not essential part of the, it is of the Mahabharata. The Sargarohan Parva is not essential part of the Mahabharata, but they were added. This handling of the past became a mental habit in India, and it continues till today. Till today, for many of us, or most of us, a Ganesha is a real presence, a coming down from the divine realms to the earth. The Apsaras are characters in stories as if they are real, such as Shakuntala and Dushyanta, story which Kalidas used. we do continue to use these stories in our dance, in our sculpture. In Jayadeva's Gita Govinda, the stories were used. Uh, but uh, uh, but following that was almost 1,000 years ago. But even today, whether it is in Bharatnatyam or in our drama uh, or in our fiction, uh, till Mahashweta Devi's Draupadi, for instance, or so many novels on Karna written in all Indian languages and so on. Because India could not and cannot, and probably for quite some time will not be able to determine where its history begins. And since that beginning is a wide open space for India, Indians accept the idea of many beginnings. Myth is I'm going to use a paradox, a real possibility for the Indian mind. Now, I come to the main observation or thesis that I want to put across to you. In the West, myth generated possibilities of power. The king was divinely ordained. The idea of divinity and a give and take between, as in the Greek myth, the realm of the devas, the deus, and of man, the humans, was a given, and kingship became possible as a premise in power management because of that give and take between the divine and the human. As the West progressed towards democracy, the need for myth as a source of political power diminished, and democracy emerged in the West not because of the support of a mythical source of power, but because there was a dream for the future. I am saying that kingship as an institution had support from accumulated past, all the past clubbed together in the form of a myth. Democracy was forward looking and always had an idea of a perennial future. A dream for the future was placed before the people, and democracy sprung up in the West. If I know that this oversimplified history is not a good idea, but in the time available for me, this is the best I can do. I now come to the question of artificial memory in our time. The memory chip, which is replacing human memory, is posing strange and difficult questions for the lovers of myth, and also question for myth itself, which is even a larger question because that question relates to the future of democracy itself, democracy, future of the people in the world. And it is as follows. Myth is possible if humans have a concept of the past, and the concept of the past enabled humans in the process of the human evolution of the human brain over time, ever since humans started using language to articulate the thoughts in the mind, last 70,000 years. This concept of time, concept of the past, and making a sense of that past, as I said about Vyasa, who was trying to make a sense of the infinite past, known or not known to him. Making sense of that past provides space for the birth of myth. The human memory is founded in the firm belief that the past exists, that time exists, and that time is forward moving. The artificial memory, the memory chip, does not have a similar link with time. It is autonomous. It is its own beginning. The artificial memory, a memory chip, does not remember anything before that chip was born. Time begins with it and it ends with it. There is neither a before nor an after. And what this memory chip remembers is within the framework of the time that is its time. This being the case, political powers that are trying to control human societies all over the world, which is the reality today. Go to any country. I mean, Trump is a story that's over, but Trump-like rulers in other countries, including our own country, trying to control, humans by overuse of artificial memory driven artificial memory driven gadgets and surveillance systems thwart the possibility of myth. And so, rather than allowing myth its own natural circulation in the society as it has been in the past, the artificial memory driven regimes, artificial memory using regimes generate a false myth or a falsified myth, which in simple English is called rumor, rumors about the past. And therefore, we notice today that what Nehru did or did not do is associated with him, or what Ambedkar did or did not do is associated with him, or what Subhash Chandra Bose did or did not do is associated with him. I do not have to give examples because you know that this is what is happening. This is a peculiar limitation and a problem that artificial memory brings to the user of that artificial memory for surveillance and control of societies. There's a second limitation, and that is the artificial memory does not have an idea of the future. It cannot dream. Natural memory allows humans to dream. We all know that Sigmund Freud had analyzed dreams and said that these are bits of memory, unorganized, disorganized, chaotic bits of memory that fall in some space or shape or dynamics become dreams. Artificial memory cannot create dreams. It can create fantasy. It cannot have myth. It has rumors. It cannot have dream. It has fantasy. And therefore, regimes that control people by using artificial memory normally become a liability and a risk for the idea of democracy, which, as I said earlier, is dependent on a dream for the future. Friends, we lovers of myth love myth not just because it amuses us, not just because it is easy material for telling stories to our children, bedtime stories for our children. Myths have a far greater function, and that function is to unite civilizations, to become foundations of civilizations. And if that foundation is under attack, it is our duty to rescue such a foundation from an attack. Artificial memory in itself is only a tool, but a tool and nothing more. But it's used by regimes for surveillance and control of the minds. Is no longer just a tool, it becomes a method, an ideology, a political practice, a political culture. Myth, keeping it alive, allowing it to circulate, understanding it in a mature way. All of this together will help us to fight rumors about the past and fantasies of the future. And therefore, myth can flow into the making of democracies in non-Western world without an iota of doubt, at least in my mind. In the West, modernity brought an end to myth, democracy brought an end to myth. In our country, it need not happen the same way because we have not sealed off the boundaries where the beginning of our civilization took place. And since the beginnings of our civilization are open, myth still has a place and space in our society. And it is with the help of that that we can go forward and be, despite of the contribution of myth, a great democratic, humanitarian, compassionate society with idea of justice, equality, and freedom. I think I have put before you the nature of the clash between artificial memory and myth. But in that clash, there is a story of the clash between ideas of democracy and ideas of dictatorship. It is for us to decide which way we are going to use myth to help dictators or to help those who have dreams of democracy. Thank you very much.